Hello everyone, and welcome to another Liverpool transfer show on Football Talk Podcast. My name is Ozzy, and I'm your host for this evening. We're finally getting some official news regarding our striker target, which we'll of course speak about later on this evening. Plus, there's also some speculation surrounding another striker target that we have, and there's also been some other rumors regarding outgoings at the club. So we'll start with the breaking news, and as you can see on the screen, it's a here we go kind of moment. And here we are. Hugo Ekitike. So it's been made official, more or less, that we have agreed a fee of around 90 to 95 million euros. So in pounds, that's roughly around 75, 80 million pounds. So that is on the verge of being completed. Personal terms have been agreed between the player and the club. Both clubs have agreed a fee, and I believe there's a payment structure in place. So it's only a matter of time that it gets announced officially, and then hopefully once that is done, then we will hopefully see Hugo Ekitike fly over with the squad as part of the Asia tour. Now, in terms of the transfer fee, it's been a big talking point amongst, I wouldn't say Liverpool fans, but probably more so than the rival fans have, a lot to say in terms of, suggesting that we've overpaid or, that's a crazy amount of money. For me, and I'll be honest with you, and I'm not just saying it because we're on the verge of signing a player. The transfer fee is not really a sort of a huge deal to me, in my opinion. If you look at the market, that is the kind of price you're going to have to pay for a good striker up towards a very, very good striker. Of course, Ekitike, for me, falls into that category in between the two because I feel like he has huge potential, but he's just on the cusp of being regarded as a top level striker. So for me, I'm very excited about the signing of Hugo Ekitike, and I think he's the right profile for Liverpool. I know some fans may have some reservations in terms of his game. Some have given lazy analysis or lazy comparisons to suggest that he's another Darwin Núñez, just because when we signed Darwin Núñez, he had a good final season with his previous club, and he wasn't a very well-known commodity in Europe. So I think that's where the lazy comparisons come into because a lot of people that haven't seen Ekitike have no idea, what type of striker he is. People that have seen him play are giving us rave reviews. And I'm talking about rival fans or rival content creators that have said, you know what, Liverpool have signed a very, very good player. So for me, you know, I don't really base my opinions on what other people say. I've seen him play a few times during the season. I've seen compilations. I'm sure all of us have to an extent, and I feel like he's going to fit the bill very well for us. He's not your typical number nine or an out and out striker as such. He's pretty much the complete forward. And when I say the complete forward, I don't want it to be taken out of context where I'm suggesting that he is 10 out of 10 in every area. What I would say is he's got a good all round game. He's good at pretty much everything that you need in a modern day attacker. So, in terms of what he brings to the table, he's dynamic on the ball, great dribbling ability, holds the ball really well. He's got great link up play. I think that's probably very underrated in terms of his skill set. Good finisher as well, can finish with left foot, right foot. Not strong in the heading department, but I guess in this day and age, not a lot of strikers are because it's not the way football is played nowadays. So for me, he has everything in his locker, and he's one of those players where he's not going to be in a static position. So he is going to roam around, and you'll see him on the wings on occasions, and that suits the way we play. I think if we had a static striker who is quite limited, where he's more of a hold up type of striker. I feel like it'll slow the way we play. So it's good to have a striker that is dynamic, that can interchange with other players, that can also be effective, in slightly out of position scenarios. So for me, I'm very pleased about the signing. Uh, in terms of comparisons, the obvious comparisons that a lot of fans are giving, and I think is right, is he's like the real Sociedad version of Alexander Isak, where you saw the potential, but he just wasn't as prolific in front of goal. And for me, that's the type of striker we're getting right now. I actually feel like Ekitike has a bit more to his game. I think his link-up play is definitely going to surprise people. And I think one of the players that's going to benefit from that kind of ability is Florian Wirtz because he'll have the ability to hold the ball, but then produce a neat flick through the defense. And that way, you'll see Florian Wirtz making over sort of not overlapping, but kind of overlapping ones where he goes past Ekitike and it ends up, being the furthest attacker on the pitch. And then that's where, he pretty much is, money where he gets a lot of good chances and scores the goals as well. And that's what he's produced for Bayer Leverkusen. So for me, it's a very exciting prospect to have Florian Wirtz and Ekitike, to get together as a combination. So for me, this is a great signing. And I know a lot of fans are maybe swayed by what other fans are telling them in terms of the price and oh he's not all that, or Newcastle fans will say that he was you know your backup option, you didn't get your primary option and all that sort of stuff. Fans will say whatever fits their agenda or fits their narrative. For me, we tried to get Isak. That was our number one target. Let's not beat around the bush. But if he's not available, we're not going to stand in one corner and cry about it. You're going to move on and try and find an adequate, target or an alternative target. And I think Ekitike, only time will tell. But I feel like what we want in terms of our striker in the team, he's automatically an upgrade to Darwin Núñez. And I feel like he's going to give us a different dimension up top. If we had Isak in our team, of course, he'd bring the same sort of ability, in my opinion. But currently, Ekitike is the one that's coming through the door, and that's my main focus. That he's the one I feel like is going to be the spearhead of our attack next season. So I'm looking forward to this signing. I'm sure a lot of you fans are as well. So feel free to let me know in the comments. But we will talk about Isak a little bit as well. Because what does this mean now? Because there hasn't been any official rejection from our part because we didn't officially place a bid, but the interest was very strong, and we pretty much made Newcastle aware that we are ready to place a bid. All you have to do is give us the green light, and then we're ready to move. So the big question is the deal off, or do Liverpool still have a chance to sign Alexander Isak? Now, Eddie Howe confirmed that he decided to leave Isak out of the Newcastle squad yesterday as they lost 4-0 to Celtic. And that's quite an odd decision for a manager to make, but even more so to say that out loud in a press conference. You know, at the minute, Isak to Liverpool is just speculation. Of course, I'm going to talk about a little bit more being a content creator, but if you look at it in black and white, it's just pretty much speculation because there hasn't been an official bid. We have made, I guess, an approach that was, officially done, but nothing more to that. No money was discussed. We were just making an inquiry to see if the player is available or not. So for Eddie Howe to send Isak home based on speculation seems a little bit odd. But I'm also reading in between the lines that it means a couple of things. It means that Isak is frustrated and unsettled at the minute, and he might be on the verge of a transfer request to for move because he's clearly not happy with the situation, and his head has been turned. Let's be honest about Liverpool's interest as well. Now, let me be a bit more neutral when it comes to this whole situation. He could also be pushing for a move to Al Hilal because that is another club that has been interested in his services. But I would say it feels more towards Liverpool only on the basis that Newcastle have tried to close the door on us, whereas for Al Hilal, they've actually given them permission to talk to Isak. But I think with Isak's head being turned right now, you know, it looks like Liverpool could be back in, some sort of mix to, to further discussions and potentially get a deal wrapped up because we're knocking on the door right now. Um, and we're just waiting to be let in order to discuss a potential deal. So I have to ask, is there any possibility that Liverpool could be signing both Ekitike and Isak? Feel free to let me know in the comments. Rival fans will tell you straight, you guys are dreaming. Dream on. That is never going to happen. My answer is that there's a very slim possibility. Honestly, I highly doubt it because I don't think Ekitike would have joined Liverpool knowing we're also going to get Isak. But you just never know in this day and age because for the first time, Liverpool are moving very different right now. And the only context that I can remember in terms of having, high level strikers in your team, remember all those years back when Real Madrid had Ronaldo in that Galactico era, and then they signed Michael Owen as well as a backup, and Michael Owen was pretty much happy to be a backup. It could be the same sort of situation where, we've got Isak, who's our top striker, but then Ekitike is more than happy to be either a deputy or, you know, give us the option to play a two-man strike force, or he can even play as a wide forward. I don't think that would be the right thing to do, Ekitike, because he's predominantly played as a centre forward for the last few years. He played as a left winger in his earlier days at Stade de Reims, but generally speaking, he is a striker. So playing him out of position for me is not the right option. But because nothing's been rejected or Liverpool haven't closed their interest on Isak, you just never know what's going to happen. So right now, it's a pipe dream right now. But until Isak gives any clarification, whether he actually officially leaves the club and joins Al Hilal, for example, or he signs a new contract at Newcastle, Liverpool fans will still be dreaming a little bit. Let's be honest. Um, and the funny thing in regards to Newcastle is that they're struggling to make signings. One thing I didn't realize until yesterday was that the James Trafford deal, the goalkeeper from Burnley, that has not actually been concluded. The move has stalled, and apparently Man City are trying to sign him as a replacement for their backup goalkeeper, which is Ortega. So they're currently finding it hard to make signings due to financial constraints. So maybe, if they open the door for us to do a deal with Isak, that could change the outlook of their transfer window. One player that they've also been linked with is Darwin Núñez. And, it looks like he could be heading towards Saudi as Al Hilal and Al Nassr have held very strong interest in signing the striker. Now, we all expect Darwin Núñez to leave at some point this summer. And look, even though he scored a hat trick today against Stoke City in a behind the closed door friendly, um, it's safe to say that Ekitike is the one that will be replacing him in the squad. So what I thought I'd do, I thought let's do a comparison of all three strikers and see, where they stand amongst each other and, see how different they are in terms of their output from last season. So the blue, sort of the dotted one, is Ekitike. Darwin Núñez is red and Isak is green. So as you can see, Ekitike has a lot of the higher sort of results. If you're looking at shots total, assisted goals, shot creation actions. Of course, this is just a graph. We can't really go, you know, thinking this is gospel. It just gives you an idea of, or an indication, what a player brings to the table. So even though that there's still question marks about Ekitike, for me, this graph shows that this is a player that has huge potential and is ready to hit that new level. Now, if he's able to produce similar numbers like he did last season, or even better in the Premier League, then it makes this argument even more worthy because it's alongside a Premier League striker like Isak, who's probably arguably one of the best strikers in the league. So for me, it's a very, very exciting prospect to see Ekitike being a Liverpool player. Hopefully, we'll get some official news from the club tomorrow. So it could be a Hugo Monday or Ekitike Monday, however you want to phrase it. But very, very exciting time to be a Liverpool fan right now. Just going to go through some of the comments before we move on to the next rumor. Spirit of LFC fan says, Aussie, how are you? Like, comment, share, and subscribe when you're coming on. Apologies, I was slightly delayed today. But yeah, I'm on now. So appreciate you tuning in. Kieran says, good evening, sir Aussie. Big up yourself, Kieran. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for tuning in. Mazzy, big up Mazzy says, Aussie, now we've got a deal agreed for Ekitike. What happens if Isak? Do we still sign him? Because obviously he would love to come Liverpool. It's a bizarre one. You'd expect me to say yes because it's Isak and he's the guy we want, but I don't know if we're going to go all in for him. I feel like we've made the inquiry. We got the indication that he doesn't want to come. And I feel like we've just left it at that. We don't have to officially say no, we don't want to sign the player anymore. So I don't know if there's going to be, further discussions with Newcastle. Clearly, the player is unsettled right now. He's not happy. He's frustrated with what's happened. But we've moved on. We've gone on to try and sign another target in Ekitike. And the only reason why I said earlier that we have a slim hope or there's a slim possibility of this happening where we sign Isak and Ekitike is because we need to sign two strikers. So in that regards, you can't rule out. If we were just wanting to sign a replacement for Núñez, for example, then there's no other room unless one of the players is going to be the Diaz replacement and plays left wing. Personally, I wouldn't want to see Ekitike on the left wing. It's not his natural position, although he could do a job there. I feel like it makes more sense to, sign a natural left winger to play on that side, which I'm sure we'll discuss at some point as well. So I'm a bit on the fence. And I'm not usually quite direct with my opinions. I would love Isak to come still, but I just don't know if it's the right move. I'd rather us sign a direct left winger to replace Diaz and then have Ekitike as the striker replacement for Núñez. That way you've got the balance in the team and we can also invest in other areas. So only time or two. I think once we get a bit of clarity from Isak's sort of side where, are they going to offer him a new contract? Is he going to sign it? Or is there any other club that's willing to join? Because I did see earlier on something today, just before I went live actually, that his agent, in quotes, says we may be close to finalizing the next step for the player. And it could be where that next step is Al Hilal, because they have been given permission to talk to Isak. But then from Isak's point of view, why would you leave the Premier League to join the Saudi Pro League? You're 25, 26, mid 20s. You're you're hitting great form in the last couple of years, but I still feel like your prime is set to come. Wouldn't it be a bit too premature to move over to Saudi? But it's one of those things where you have to allow players to do what they want. If he feels like it's the best deal for him financially, then so be it. It is a career end of the day. So let's see what happens with Isak. But I don't think it'll happen personally, but I know a lot of fans are still holding on to some glimmer of hope. So we'll see. If it happens, that would be out of this world. It really would. But if we were to sign two of those players, would it mean we don't get a left winger replacement? Who knows? So we'll see. We'll get some clarity, I guess, in the next week or two. Another comment here from Spirit of LFC fans says, if we can't get Alexander Isak, go for plan B like Ekitike. He's technical, hold up, link up, pace, and skillful. He needs to improve his finishing. That is something he does need to improve. But I feel like that comes with time and age as well because he's very young. He's only 22, 23 years of age. So, he's played at a very good level. He moved over to PSG, didn't work out due to limited game time. Then he moved on to Frankfurt. And Frankfurt is the first club where he's actually played on a regular basis. And I think that's literally escalated his development. At PSG, he pretty much was a bit stagnated. He didn't really move. Like he was a pretty much a bit part player. Very rarely played because he was signed as a backup for Mbappe. So unless Mbappe is injured, there's no way Ekitike is going to rotate with Mbappe and Rodri sorry, and Ekitike was a very young player at the time, still learning his trade, 18, 19 years of age. So, he wasn't quite up to the level that he is currently. So for me, his time at PSG was probably one to forget. But under Frankfurt, he's been really good. He's definitely fulfilled his potential. And I feel like he's just ready to hit that next level. So should be a very exciting prospect for Liverpool going forward. Kieran says, I feel like we have overpaid slightly as I will value him at around 70 million. But at the end of the day, Frankfurt don't want to let him go. So we have to overpay a bit. I'm happy with that. That's true. I'm not going to say, oh, it is the perfect deal or value for money. We have overpaid. Let's not beat around the bush. But if you just look at the market, to sign a decent level striker, you're paying about 50, 60, 70 million anyway. So it's just a going rate. And of course, with Frankfurt, he's their main asset. They sold Marmoush in January, and now they've had to sell their second striker in Ekitike. So they were always going to try and get the premium price for the two. I think they sold Mamouche for about 60, so they'll get about 80, so 140 in combination for two strikers that they've received now. So the time was going to come where he was going to part ways. So it was probably half expected from their point of view. But look, in terms of the fee, even if it's just slightly what we overpaid, it's not a huge deal, in my opinion. And it's not like he's just a random striker from, a random league or like a low standard league. Like he's playing at a very good level and he's very highly sought after. Chelsea were linked with him and really wanted to sign him, and they end up going towards Pedro because I think Ekitike wasn't showing any indication that he wanted to join Chelsea. So when you hear news like Ekitike had only one preferred destination, that was Liverpool, it makes sense. The statements align in regards to that. So he was definitely sought after. Manchester United were linked to him as well. At one point, I think Arsenal showed a bit of interest in him early in the last few months. So there was always interest in the player. So he's someone that I feel like I think he's going to surprise a lot of fans because the expectation is quite low. I don't have high expectations because I don't want to, sort of add pressure to the situation. But I do feel like he's ready. Like once he, gets hit the ground running, I feel like he's definitely going to just blossom and really live up to the expectations that we have as a fan base. So I'm excited. I think it's a very exciting signing. Look at the striker market. Who else is out there that would excite you? A player that has unbelievable talent, probably a rare talent in terms of being a striker with amazing link up play. It doesn't happen that often. So I've seen fans trying to do comparisons. So the Alexander Isak one is probably the right one. Calling him a baby Isak, I guess. I've heard some people suggest like Nicolas Anelka, a player that I really rated back in the day. I think in terms of link up play and dribbling, I think there are similarities, but I don't think they're like for like because Anelka was explosive on the ball and his finishing was another level. So for me, certain traits, yes, but not quite to that extent. But that's the kind of style of striker we have. Someone that's he's not a speed merchant. He's someone that likes to be part of the team, get involved, likes to have the ball. He's just not going to stand around and try and create space to get onto the ball. He wants to be part of the build up, and he tries to lay it off for his other teammates. So he's a proper team player. So I think he's going to be a great signing for us going forward. Kieran with his second comment says, very excited by this signing, performing well at a young age and has great skill and movement on and off the ball. He's currently a good striker, but I believe we can mold him into the next step. Isak, I 100% agree. I think that is what we're expecting, and that's why we've probably regarded him as our, one of our main targets, and that is based on the facts that you just mentioned there. He's definitely a very good striker right now. He's just on the verge. If he, evolves and continues development, he's gonna reach that next level. So for me, it's a very, very exciting prospect. Raji Pengtin himself, he says Chiesa has been left out of the Asia tour. So if we sell him and Núñez, do we still go for Isak and Rodrigo or some other forward? We'll speak about Chiesa later in the show because I was quite surprised with that inclusion from the squad. Um, but if he is to leave, we'll have to assess the squad a bit more, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail because I would have sold Chiesa. I feel like we're putting more pressure on us and we've got to do more work. I don't think we need to sign two, three forwards. So I would have preferred Chiesa to have been an option for us. But yeah, it's very, very surprising. So we'll talk about that later in the show. Spirit LFC fan says the strike market is dire, but it's got room to get better and it's a bit overpriced in the economy. Yeah, it is. But I do feel like the striker market, you are paying a little bit over the odds unless there's a release clause or a gentleman agreement between clubs. Otherwise, you are going to pay over the odds. Sesko is available for about 100 mil. So for me, that's not realistic at all. Man says Ozzy Isak's agent has been talking about Isak, saying something will happen soon. That's literally just what I read as well, because I saw it on my phone just before I was logging on. It'll be interesting because is it Liverpool or is it Saudi? Because we know Al Hilal have been given permission to talk to him. So I feel like it might be Saudi. I'm not, hoping or wishing that because I would love Isak in our team. Um, we've got the signing of Ekitike, but I feel like if you had Isak as well to our mix, we've pretty much just guaranteed success, in my opinion. And that's not me being cocky or arrogant. A lot of fans would probably agree with that statement because we've got a complete squad, more or less. So let's see. I think it's going to be very interesting in terms of what happens in the coming days. Newcastle, they got some work to do because if they want to keep him, they will have to give him improved terms. I'm not sure they're able to do that because of the PSR ruling right now. So let's see what happens. Spirit of LFC fans says, are we gonna try to sell or offload these players such as Simicast, Ramsey, Williams, Elliott, Morton, Doak, Núñez, Diaz, and Chiesa to get some cash? So in terms of the names that you've listed, Simicast, it's an interesting one. I would have said yes, but you can't rule out of him staying because Robertson might be regarded as a centre back option. Not that I'd want that, but I think I think he'll probably end up leaving. But I wouldn't be surprised if he stayed because if Robertson is going to be utilised more as a centre back, then you better have more options than not in other areas. So so you never know. In terms of Ramsey, yeah, he's the forgotten guy, isn't it? I think he'll probably get a loan move only on the basis that a lot of clubs wouldn't want to invest money in him because he hasn't shown any sort of form or fitness over the last 2, 3 years. So it's very hard to sell someone that hardly plays. So I think a loan move would be a bit more realistic. Reece Williams, yeah, just like Nat Phillips, I think his time is to go, but we're not going to get much money from him. So I'm not expecting to add his sale as part of our transfer kitty. Elliott's an interesting one. I would love for him to stay. I just don't know. It would probably come from him where if he wants to move on, he'll probably go. But I feel like me personally, I'd keep him because I don't think we need the money to invest in the squad. Because right now, whoever is the console replacement, the money's there. We've got about 30 odd million to replace that player. And then in terms of us signing a striker, that most of that finance will be coming from the Núñez sale as well. And then with the left winger replacement, that's going to come from the Diaz sell as well in terms of what we're expecting in the future. So we don't have to sell these other players to generate funds. So that's why I wanted Chiesa to stay and I wanted Elliott to stay because I feel like this adds complete depth in our attack line. But who knows at this stage? Morton, I expect him to leave at some point. Of course, because he had such a great Euros for England, hopefully, it adds a bit of value to his stock and we can try and get a good price for him going forward. Ben Doak, his stock is high right now, so I do expect us to sell him at some point. Darwin Núñez, yeah, he's definitely leaving. I don't know where. I think Saudi is the most likely destination, but I do expect him to leave. Diaz, the same. Bayern Munich or Saudi, I think is his likely destination as well. And Chiesa, based on what we heard today, it looks like he could be on the verge of leaving as well. So, bit of a shame, but let's see what happens regarding these players. Kieran says, um, I very highly doubt that we get Isak because we have other positions that need addressing, such as Diaz replacement and a new centre back. Also, Newcastle want more than 120 million. Surely we can't fund this. Probably not, if I'm being honest with you. I think we have the money because we haven't been spending much over the last few years. So the money is there to invest in these players, and we wouldn't sort of break any rules or regulations in regards to PSR. But I don't think it makes the right sense to sign Isak as well because of the balance of the squad. Now it probably comes across that I don't want Isak. If you guys have watched my show previously, that has been my dream signing for about a year or two now. So for me, he's always the guy that I wanted at the club. But you have to be smart with these transfers. You have to make sure these players are the right profile and it adds the right balance within the squad, not just the team. And I feel like with Ekitike, if he signs for Liverpool, which of course is going to happen in due course, he won't sign as a backup. It just doesn't make sense for me for that to happen. And for if you put it in terms of financial sense, if we do get Isak and Ekitike, we've spent 80 million on a backup. That doesn't sit well either. So I don't know. I'll be very pleasantly surprised if we end up signing both Isak and Ekitike. But hey, I'm all for it. If that was to occur, so we just gotta sit back and see what happens in the next few days. Spirit of LFC fans said we need Marc Guehi centre back. He's a perfect centre back and also a potential leader. We also need a defensive midfielder and winger that can play left wing, right wing. This will be a good signing and transfer market. So in terms of Guehi, I'll be speaking about him later on in the show. Defensive midfielder, I think that is definitely a player that we could add to our squad, but I don't think it will be a priority for this window. I think it's something we'll look into next summer because we have adequate names and players within that department to rotate in at double pivot positions. So I don't think that's going to be a priority. I feel like that sort of player, you'll end up spending quite a bit of money as well, unless someone becomes available and they're available at a very good price. Other than that, I expect us to sign someone next summer for that. And a winger that can play left wing, right wing. It'll come down to who we try to replace Luis Diaz with because I do expect that player to be a bit more versatile, where he can play across the front line. That would be the right profile to sign. So the latest pick is Rodrigo. That's the one that everyone's talking about, and he pretty much covers that spectrum. So I do think that will be the profile that we'll be going for once Luis Diaz leaves. Raja Penty says Hugo Ekitike is an absolute baller at 23 years old. It's okay to spend 78 million, but do you think he'll become a top goal scorer for Liverpool? If I'm being honest, I don't think he'll become top goal scorer this season as a Liverpool player. But once he's settled in, once he's confident in his ability and what he's bringing to the field, I feel like the following season he's ready to be that guy going forward. So maybe not in the opening season, but in his second and third, I'm expecting him to do a lot better. So yes, I totally agree with that. Um, Spirit of LFC fan says Liverpool 5, Stoke City nil. Núñez hat trick, Chiesa and Rio, Jota and Andre Muro look good. I saw the Muro, so yeah, very very pleased with that. And of course, it's going to be a tough time for us Liverpool fans. Every time we play, we just have to try and bring some sort of positivity when we speak about Jota and Andre Silva as well. So it's good that the club are doing it in a very respectable way. At Preston, I appreciate the Preston fans, singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." So these little things that they mean a lot. These sort of gestures. So it's very positive, and teams that we're facing as well, they're being very respectful at the same time. So it's a positive look going forward. Spirit of LFC fans says Rio and Nioni need to be on the bench and get first team experience. We can use Rio and Nioni in a domestic cup competition this season. When is Liverpool FC Adidas football shirt coming out? So in terms of Rio and Nioni, I think they will be in and around the team. So for me, I think Rio especially, I can see him having a bit more involvement in the second part of the season. He'll be utilized more in the domestic cup games, i.e. your Carabao Cup and FA Cup fixtures. And I think Nioni will be the same. So those two players are definitely players that we rate very, very highly and should be available, I guess, for first team selection whenever required. Because if we have a few injuries, then those are the two that we'll look towards in terms of a midfield addition or a striker or a winger addition. So I do expect them to get some sort of game time during the course of next season. In terms of the Adidas deal for Liverpool, I believe it will be from the 1st of August. So that's some at some point late next week. So that's what I've heard in terms of the Adidas deal. Man says Ozzy, what's the latest news on Kanate? I'll be speaking about him very shortly as well. So not a lot to report on Kanate, but we will discuss him very shortly. Spirit of LFC fan says we need Sabozan and Gakpo set up, input, assist goals, and better performances. Gakpo was very consistent last year until he picked up his injury. So for me, it's just him, finding that momentum in the team, and I feel like he's very efficient on the ball. So I do like what Gakpo offers on the pitch in terms of Szoboszlai. I think he showed good elements of his game throughout the season. Maybe in terms of the stat element where the GA wasn't very high, it kind of looks like he didn't have a great season. But if you watched him in games, he was very pivotal in terms of how we played and how we set up from the front line in terms of pressing from the front, being the focal point for that. So for me, both players will have a huge role for Liverpool next season. Spirit of LFC fans commenting saying, if Newcastle United want our man like Darwin Núñez, let's play hardball back to them. Of course, 100%. Show us the money, 80 million. If you want him, then we'll talk about it. Otherwise, you know where the door is. We're not going to just be, nice about or give them a cut price. They've got to pay above the odds, in my opinion. So there's no way we're going to let them have a free pass on Darwin Núñez. Spirit of LFC fans commented and says, "What do you think of alternative options to Rodrigo like Otara or Shade or Semenyo that are Premier League experience at a reasonable price?" So in terms of alternative left wing options, Otara, I like him. Not for Liverpool, unfortunately. I don't think he's quite to that level. Shade, decent player, but again, not Liverpool standards. Semenyo would have been an interesting one, but he's just signed a new contract for Bournemouth, so I think that's pretty much out of the window now. So in terms of left wing options in in the Premier League, players that are available, who is there? There's not many, I'll be honest with you, because when I was doing my team of the season before um, the sort of transfer uh, window opened, I guess, there weren't many stand-up players. I think I ended up choosing Cunha at left wing because he played that role for Wolves. But generally speaking, it's an area where we don't really have a standout performer. Over the years you'll have like your Hazards and all that type of players. We don't have one in the league, so it's about time one of the big boys signs a high profile left wing, and maybe Liverpool can be that team if they can try and get Rodrigo. In terms of the Premier League, in terms of options, there aren't many. One option that might appease some fans, doesn't appease me, is Anthony Gordon. But he wouldn't come into the team and be a first team starter. He would be a backup for Cody Gakpo. That's the kind of position I see him playing. So for me, there aren't many options in the Premier League. We have to venture and look at the other leagues because I don't think there's adequate quality there. Um, Mazzy says, Aussie, just say we sign both Ekitike and Isak. Can they both play in the same team? If so, then I've got a sneaky feeling we'll get Isak as well. Now, if we were to play them in the same team, number one of them will have to play our position. So let's say Diaz leaves and Ekitike and Isak are two sort of forward options. In this scenario, you could put Ekitike on the left wing and you can play Isak through the middle in your 4-2-3-1 formation. If Liverpool want to switch it up, we can play like a 4-4-2 diamond where Verts is your number 10, and then you have an Ekitike and Isak. But that wouldn't happen because where do you fit in Mohamed Salah in that mix? So, if we're gonna play two strikers, it's going to be Salah and one of Isak or Ekitike, in my opinion. So unfortunately, I feel like we're going to have to force the situation if both players were part of the Liverpool team. So that's why I feel like it doesn't add the balance. So if we were to sign both, and let's say it does become a reality, Ekitike will have to be on the bench. It's as simple as that. He gives us that strength in depth, but at the same time, I would be a little bit worried because he's developing so well. If he joins another team and becomes not a bench player, because that's quite disrespectful. He's not just going to play on the bench, but he's going to be in rotation with Isak. So you're not going to play to a full rhythm if you're in and out of the team. So for me, if we have done our homework and we've done thorough scouting on Ekitike and we feel like he's the next big thing, you've got to give him all of the faith and belief that he's going to be that guy and give him that leading role in the team. So let's see. let's see what happens. You never know. Football is a funny game sometimes. So let's see what happens. Double D, big up. Double D says keep Harvey. I think we should keep Harvey as well. I don't think we need the funds. We clearly know, he loves Liverpool. That's his boyhood club. And I don't feel like it's a necessity to push him out now. Some fans will argue and say, well, look, he's not going to get much game time if he stays. But I feel like we don't have cover for Mohamed Salah in this team. If Chiesa goes, we don't have a right winger cover at all. Because you've got Gakpo Diaz on the left, and even if Diaz leaves, there will be another left winger option. And you've got Verts, Szoboszlai, then you've got at the minute it would be Ekitike and Núñez, right? So we don't have a backup for Salah. You can put players in that role, so you can put in Frimpong if you want to play him a bit more further up. You can play Szoboszlai there if you need to, but there's no real like for like backup. And I feel like if we kept Elliot, then he would be that guy in that position. So I would like to see him stay for at least another season just to prove, he is Liverpool standard. But I don't know. Um, Very difficult to say at the minute. Let's see what happens. He's been linked to West Ham. It's I don't. They're a decent club, but I don't know. If that's the club for him to go for. But we'll see what happens. Royal Red says, big up, mate. Big up yourself, Royal Red. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for tuning in. Jordan says, yo, bro. Big up, Jordan. I hope you're well. Ozan Kamak says, yo, Ozzy, big up yourself, Ozan Kamak. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for tuning in. And then you've got Spirit LFC fans saying big up to Jordan as well. So let's move on to the next rumor. And of course, it's Lucho. So the current rumor that we're hearing regarding Diaz and Bayern Munich is that Bayern Munich seem to be getting a bit frustrated with Liverpool as they've already apparently identified an alternative target in Malik Fofana if a deal cannot be concluded for Luis Diaz. Now, my thoughts on this news that broke through earlier on today, I think they're bluffing. I don't think they're trying to walk away from the deal. They're just pretending that they will. He's their main target right now. He's the one that will come into this team and make a huge difference. If you go for Malik Fofana, don't get me wrong, a player with huge potential, but with the injury unfortunately on Musiala, and they were unable to sign Florian Wirtz, they don't really have a player that will come in and have an instant impact. They sold Leroy Sané to Galatasaray. Gnabry's there, but he's not as dynamic as he used to be. So they're lacking pace, on that side of the pitch. So Diaz will bring that. And then if you've got Elise on your right wing, fantastic balance in that Bayern lineup. So for me, that would be the player they should go above and beyond for. And I do expect them to present another deal, if I'm being honest. Whether it happens or not, it remains to be seen. I kind of feel like this rumor was probably some paper talk because we all know that Liverpool hold an interest in Fofana, or maybe I'm reading it incorrectly, and maybe there is some truth to it, or Bayern are trying to play 4D chess with us, trying to connect the dots and align the same targets for both clubs. If one can't get one, the other team will get the other. So who knows? But um, if they were to, walk away from the deal and sign Malik Fofana, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, if I'm being honest with you. My focus will be Diaz needs to go over to Saudi and get his money. That would be my notion, and then we'd hopefully get a good paycheck out of it as well. So let's see what happens with Diaz. I'm sure we'll get some further developments in the coming days. Now on to the next target. It's Jean-Philippe Mateta. Now it appears that we're no longer holding an interest in signing the Crystal Palace striker. Um, my thoughts on this, I'm not hugely surprised, as I think he was on our shortlist because we were trying to see what options are available. And if we weren't able to get Isak and Ekitike, who's the alternative? I was actually, with the idea that, we could sign Ekitike and also sign Mateta. I think that would have presented great squad depth with Mateta being the more experienced option off the bench. But it looks like he's no longer a target. I also heard some different, difference of pricing where one source would say that Palace wanted around 40 to 50 million. Apparently, another source said that Liverpool were only willing to spend 30 million. So that's a huge gap between the two clubs in terms of the valuation. So if I'm honest, the only player that we should be negotiating with Crystal Palace is Marc Guehi. Um, and this rumor has certainly quieted a bit, but I think we're still in the mix. And once we secure our striker signing, which hopefully will be done in the next 24/48 hours, I'm sure we'll move on and speed up the process to sign Marc Guehi. So only time will tell in terms of Marc Guehi. Is he going to be a Liverpool player or not? I think he will be. If I was to make a sort of prediction in terms of when that will get done, maybe in a couple of weeks' time, or 2, 3 weeks' time. I think that would be the time frame because I think Arsenal would like to try and get as many of his new signings on board in terms of preseason preparation. We've held interest in Gay for quite some time, and we've got the funds. It's not like we're waiting for a player to be sold. Concer's gone, so we're more than ready to just make our move and get the player over the line. So I expect us to make a move for Gay at some point next week. So that would be my prediction in terms of what happens with regards to our defensive target. And speaking of defensive targets, the current rumor in terms of Ibu Konate is that Liverpool have not given up on renewing his contract. For me, that doesn't validate too much. It's pretty much the obvious. Real Madrid are knocking on the door. They want to try and acquire his signature, but of course, he can't say out loud right now because he still has 1 year remaining of his contract, so he'll need to fulfill, his responsibility to honor that contract. So to hear that Liverpool haven't given up, that's not a surprise because we will try our best to keep Konate on board. Now, the the question is that going to happen? Has his head been turned to join Real Madrid next summer? Have they already had private discussions? Has him and his agent been promised huge sign-on fees to get them over the line? At this stage, who knows? We can only speculate, but we'll have to wait and see in terms of Konate because it's very unclear. I feel like if he stays at the club after this window, my gut feeling will suggest that he's going to stay for 1 more year and then leave at the end, which is not what I want because I don't want another Trent Alexander-Arnold saga like we did last season. So I'd like to know where he's going. What's the position? Because we want clarity when it comes to these kind of contract talks and stuff. So let's see what happens. But in terms of any development, no real development on this rumor. So something that came up early on is Chiesa. So he scored today behind a closed door friendly against Stoke City where we won 5-0. But unfortunately, he's not been included in the Asia tour as the whole squad have just flown out um, this evening. So the question is, why has he not been selected? Was he unfit? As in, did he pick up an injury after today's fixture? Or is he surplus to requirements now? Is he not a player that is going to be part of our squad next season? I think it's the latter. I have a feeling that Arne Slot doesn't have faith in the player, and I think he's going to be sold, which for me is such a shame because we might have to sign more than 2, 3 forwards to make up the numbers. Because let's just kind of put it in. Do you know what? I'm going to bring up a graphic. Let's do it together and then see, how it will appear because I don't feel like it makes much sense to sell Chiesa because that's not how it should be, to be fair. So let me bring up a graphic and then we can, add the attackers and see, who is in what position. So just bear with me whilst I load it up. So here we go. So I won't do the whole team. I'll just do the front position. So In terms of the left winger, we'll say it's Gakpo because actually we'll say it's Gakpo because I expect Diaz to leave. Okay, let's just say for this scenario, we sign a Rodrigo. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's say that is the striker we end up getting, and then his backup will be Gakpo. And if it's not Rodrigo, we'll just say it's Diaz for now, for argument's sake. And then in terms of the number 10, this one is pretty much straightforward. It's going to Verts and Szoboszlai as your backup. And then Salah doesn't have a backup. So that's why I've suggested that we should have Harvey Elliott. I think that should be the backup for me. It's either Harvey Elliott or Chiesa. We can't sell both. That doesn't make sense to me. So the big question is who does Arne Slot prefer? Because both players weren't heavily involved under his stewardship last season. Elliott was, but then picked up that injury and was out for 2, 3 months. And then when he came back, he struggled to find any rhythm and therefore became a bit part player. Chiesa, kind of similar, but he didn't. His injury was a bit on and off, where he'd be fit for one game in the squad, pick up another injury, out for a few weeks. So that became more of a constant theme. Was a bit more available in terms of the last 2, 3 months of the season, but Arsenal didn't utilize him enough and pretty much only played him once or twice in order to attain 5 appearances in the league. That of course led to him, receiving a medal. So um, it wasn't on sort of from an attacking point of view, in my opinion. And then you've got Ekitike. Oops, if I can spell his name correctly. Ekitike. There we go. And I'm going to leave it at that because I expect Darwin Núñez to leave. So right now, we've got no backup striker for Ekitike. So on paper, if we were to keep Elliot, that would make perfect sense to do that. But if Chiesa was kept, then I would have just listed Chiesa as our backup striker. So for me, that allows you to not invest too heavily in the squad, because then I feel like if you want a backup for Ekitike, what profile do you go for? Do you go for an experienced striker like a Mateta that I mentioned as in earlier on, or do we find another striker that's just a level down Ekitike in terms of quality? So it's someone that has played maybe a bit of a lower team somewhere else, or you know would be content with joining Liverpool and playing as a backup striker. So only time will tell. But I feel like Chiesa as a backup striker option wouldn't be the worst case scenario in the world. And I feel like with this team here, you've got the right balance. You've got Rodrigo on your left. So whoever is the new left winger signing, that'll be the main guy. If it's like a Malik Fofana, for example, then for me it's Gakpo above Malik Fofana. But I'm expecting Liverpool to get a high quality left winger in the team. Verts, that's pretty much his position now. Salah, that's his position. Elliot is back up for me, makes the natural sense. If he was to go and Chiesa was to leave for in this scenario, we've got more work to do. We've got to sign two more attackers plus Rodrigo. So that's three new signings. So for me, it makes more sense to sign a new striker, which is Ekitike, sign a left winger to replace Diaz. So you're basically replacing Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez, and you brought the players in, and the rest of the players remain as it is. That way, there's a bit more stability. There's not too much chopping and changing. 'Cause I feel like that will disrupt the momentum or the dynamics of the front line because now you've got three new attackers, for example. They need to understand how the other players operate, and it would take slightly longer time for them to get accustomed to how each other plays. So it makes more sense to keep Chiesa and Elliott, and then we just sign Ekitike and Rodrigo to be that player. And if Rodrigo needs to take time to settle, as in whoever is the new signing, Gakpo can be the first team left winger, and then once that player has, fully adapted to the Premier League standard, then they can be the first team one. So there's no sort of risk involved in that. And with Ekitike, I feel like he needs to be given a run of games, and Chiesa can come in to be an impact sub or rotate with Ekitike whenever called upon. So for me, it makes the most sense to have both players in the squad. but only time. So if we sell Elliot and Chiesa, I feel like we're reducing the numbers for the sake of it now, and we don't really need the funds in that manner. So that's how I see it. So feel free to let me know in the chat. I feel like we need to keep Chiesa and we need to keep Elliot, and then we just sign the like for like replacements for departing players like your Darwin Núñez and your Luis Diaz. Then there's not too much crazy changes happening, and then next season, we can adjust those positions a bit more, and depart. Players can depart, and we find the adequate replacements then. So let's see what happens. But that is just the feeling that I have, and we'll get the overview of the squad in the coming weeks, and then we'll see, who stays and who leaves and who is our new signings as well. We've still got one more signing, I think, up our sleeves. So let's see, what happens there. That's the final rumor. I'm just going to read some of the comments before we close the show. Uh, Kieran says, "Don't rate Coleman highly, and Gnabry is even worse." Is Coleman still there? I thought he was linked with a move to Saudi, so maybe that never happened. But I don't feel like he's that same sort of player anymore. So yeah, I do agree with your analysis. They're kind of strange how they have both fallen off. They used to be scary players. I think with Coleman, it's more two-faced Gnabry as well. They've picked up a lot of injuries over the years. So I feel like due to that, it's definitely taken a toll on their bodies, and they've just lost that sort of that burst of speed that made them so explosive. And it happens to players, and those are players that are approaching towards their late 20s, and then once you touch that 30 age bracket, you have to kind of evolve your game. You've got to be more of a technical player, and you can't really rely on your speed anymore. So because they were pretty much known as speed merchants, they haven't been as effective, from a technical point of view. So it's a shame, but that is how it happens, unfortunately, sometimes for speedy attacking players. Roger Painter said, "Would you offer Diaz a new improved contract or take 80 million and get Rodrigo or another top left winger?" I like Diaz, and I've said that quite a few times, but in this current situation, I feel like Diaz needs to leave because he's shown a tad bit of disrespect, to speak to other clubs, and he's pretty much voiced that he wants to leave. He's not happy. He's not going to get a new contract or improved terms. So because of his current stance, for me, it just makes it an easy answer to say, sell him for 80 million because I feel like 80 million is a good bit of business for Luis Diaz. And then we sign a Rodrigo or another left winger like a Barcola, like someone of that ilk. And I think that would just add a new dimension to our team. So for me, I would sell. But if he wants to stay, I wouldn't be against it because I do rate the player. It's just that he's pretty much thrown the pram out, he dummy out the pram, and he's kind of just been a bit slightly disruptive, with his comments. So hopefully we'll get some validation soon in terms of if he's going to buy in or not. I think he'll end up at Saudi. That's my prediction. I think that's the move he'll end up doing, but only time will tell. Uh, Miley says, "Try and make sense of this LFC inquiry about Isak, make him unsettled, then agree a fee for Newcastle's top target. Ekitike, Eddie Howe has sent him home because of speculation. Now his agent is talking." Yeah, that's your second comment there. It's a bizarre one. Because when this was happening, where we made the approach, to ask Newcastle if he was available, they kind of rebuffed us and didn't really show any encouragement that they were willing to talk business. So then we were like, all right, fine. If you're not going to give us our prime target, then we're going to move on and sign your prime target, which was a Hugo Ekitike. And ironically, he ends up being our second choice anyway. So, we kind of played 4D chess there where, we've said to them, look, take one option or the other. If you're not going to give us Isak, we're taking Ekitike. If you want Ekitike, we'll sign Isak. So we're getting one of the strikers, which is Ekitike. For us to get both, I don't know. I know he's unsettled, but I don't think that's enough to suggest that we're going to go and sign the player. He's going to cost at least 125, 130 million in my opinion. So I don't think he's going to be cheap. When I say cheap, he's not going to be 120. I think that's always been the ball mark. I think they'll try and milk it and try and get 130 million pounds. For us to spend 130 plus, around 80 odd for XTF, so 200 plus on two strikers, I doubt it. You know, I could be completely wrong because this is the summer where Liverpool have pleasantly surprised us. So it could be where it's another joyous occasion where we do something that's unexpected and sign players of real quality for two positions. So let's see what happens. But I'm not entirely sure on the Isak one. I don't think it's going to happen, if I'm being brutally honest. Ozan Kabak says that 80 million from Lucio Cell could still contribute to either centre back or another forward. Aussie, I think it'd contribute towards the forward more than the centre back because the Kwanzaa deal, we still got money for that. I think we got around 30 odd million for that. So that should be enough to get Guehi. I think Guehi will probably come, if I was to make a prediction, around 40 million pound. I think that would be the sort of the ballpoint mark that Liverpool would be willing to do business. Anything higher than that, then it's a little bit steep for a player that's got 1 year remaining of his contract. But the 80 million, I think that can definitely be used on a Rodrigo or that type of forward. I feel like that's going to be groundbreaking. I'd rather sign that type of forward rather than a forward that has potential like a Malik Fofana. I like him, don't get me wrong, but I would rather us sign a real top quality winger because I feel like that would just definitely add more of a fear factor. If people aren't concerned about Ekitike, they'd be concerned about Rodrigo because of what he's produced over the years. So for me, those two players would add a great balance to our team. And yeah, very, very exciting prospect for us Liverpool fans if that was to become a reality. And just got a comment here from Reggie Pinty says, How happy are you with the signings LSU have made and what do you want next? I'm very happy with the signings. I really am. Last summer, no, this time last year, I was desperate for signings. I was, you know, showing rumors of potential players joining Liverpool. But in the back of my thinking, yeah, we're not getting any of these players. And it was a frustrating summer because other clubs were moving, we were standing still. We weren't really adding quality to our squad. The big scenario ended up being Zubimendi, and that never came to fruition. So this season round, of course, we're doing more business. But what's impressing me is the way we're doing business. We've signed players very early on. The foreign vert still, you don't expect that to happen like in June. Like you don't expect to make that signing at that time of the season. That's the sort of deal that you expect to be towards the latter stage of the window because it's a huge deal. There's a lot of different elements involved, different parties involved, from a finance point of view, but also merchandise because obviously he's sponsored by Alias. So image rights. So you're expecting that deal to be very complicated. We made that look like it was easy work and got that deal done very, very quickly. So for me, I've been very impressed by the speed of how these signings have been made. That's the key there. And the profile players, were making very smart signings. We're signing for now, but we're also signing for the future. And that's the encouraging thing, Florian Wirtz, young player, probably the best number 10 in world football. And I'm not just saying that because he's a Liverpool player. I probably would have said that to you a few months anyway, because he's that good. He's 22, that kind of age range. You've got Frimpong, a player that I feel like fits the bill into what we need, attacking threat from that right hand side, can play right back, but can also utilize a bit further up if required. He costs around 30 million. He's for the future, though, 24 years of age. Then you got Kirkes, pretty much a robo regen. He's that type of profile. He's been brought in for 40 million. He's the one for the long term as well. So we're making smart signings. Ekitike, young striker, but with huge potential and very different profile to the other strikers that other teams are linked to. We've been linked with the likes of Isak, Alvarez, Osimhen, Gyökeres, Sesko, just to name 5 strikers there. He's got more ability than all of them. I'm not saying he's better than all of them, but a lot of the other players there, they've got, specific traits. Now, Gyökeres is a finisher, but other parts of his game, you'd question, is he a good hold-up player? Is he, good with the link-up player? I'd probably question that. Osimhen, another player who I feel like is a fantastic finisher around that 6-yard box. But, because of the way he plays, would he slow us down by holding up the ball and all that sort of stuff. Then you've got Sesko, who I'm not impressed with him. For me, he's very raw. He's not a clinical finisher. I feel like because he's been given that title of being a baby Haaland because you replaced him at Red Bull Salzburg, doesn't mean he's the guy. So for me, not the right sort of quality that Liverpool should be going for, and his price was way inflated. And then you've got Alvarez, who fits the bill completely, but unavailable, and Isak as well fits the bill, but his club are not willing to sell him right now. So he was the best option out there, but he gives, different areas as well. Alvarez is more of a 9.5, so he, has a lot to his game. Isak is a straight up number 9, whereas Ekitike is probably closer to being a 9.5, where he's a striker, but he plays like a number 10 because he likes to drop deep and link up play as well. So for me, he's a great profile. I'm very excited about the signing. So only time will tell, how well he does. I feel like he's gonna have a good season for us. But let's see what happens going forward. Um, Another comment here from Ozan Kabay says, this time last year, we were twiddling our thumbs hoping for Zubimendi. Yeah, we were, honestly. Crazy times when you think about it because it was a name that kind of came out of nowhere. So you're like thinking, okay, Zubimendi. Well, watching all these compilations, I was like, he's a good player, but I was still like not convinced in terms of the physicality point of view. But I thought because we're playing a double pivot, he's going to be that deep playmaker. But look, I'm not going to sound bitter because he's gone over to Arsenal, but the form of Gravenberch as shown last season that satisfied me even more because he's a player I've rated for years. And if you've followed the channel, if you've watched me over the years, I've always spoken highly about Gravenberch. When Gravenberch was at Ajax, I thought at the time, I thought he was on the same path as Bellingham because they're similar age. They're both playing centre mid, similar build, similar style in terms of how they played. Of course, Bellingham's gone on to be a bit more of a attack-minded player, playing as a number 10, whereas uh, Gravenberch playing in the double pivot, more of a number 6 now. That's what he's been molded into. But they had the same level of potential at one point. So for me, he's a player I've always liked. I thought the move to Bayern wasn't the right one for him, so I'm just pleased that Liverpool were able to rescue him to some point and bring him to Liverpool. And look, first season was always going to be a tricky one because he was inactive at Bayern Munich for that year that he joined, so he needed to get back to his full form and get accustomed to the Premier League. I think once he had that one season under his belt, he was raring to go, and he just fitted in so well to Arne Slot's philosophy in terms of what he wanted in his game, in terms of playing in that number 6 role, and the rest is history. So for me, he's got more room to grow. He's not the final article. I feel like he's got levels to achieve as well. I think he can excel even further, being more defense minded, being more destructive in terms of his tackling and sniffing danger. And I feel like he can definitely be a bit more progressive with his passing. As a runner, in terms of ball carrier, he's definitely got that in his locker. But I think his passing, he could definitely improve as well. So for me, the sky is literally the limit for Gravenberch. And looking back at the Zubimendi deal, it was probably a good thing that we never got him in the end. So I'm all for it. Other car says, "Oh, how we've upgraded from economy to business class. Yeah, we're living nice now. We have definitely upgraded from sitting in crammed areas to having plenty of leg room. That's how us fans are right now. We're relaxed a bit more. We're not feeling pressure about the new season coming up. We're excited, whereas other fans are a little bit concerned. They're making moves in terms of their clubs, but they've got one eye on Liverpool, thinking, "Oh, these guys are making Ekitike as well." Like they're concerned. So it's a great time, and fans will justify their own club's sort of stance in terms of what business that they're doing. If you're a Man City fan, you're going to say, "Oh, we've signed Turkey, we've done this and that." Arsenal say, well, they haven't got Eucharist, but I don't know if that's gonna happen. But they're going to, say that we've got this player and that player. So, let the games begin. But for me, I've been very pleased with our business right now, and I feel like there's more to come. We're not stopping. We're going to, in my opinion, I think we're going to get Ekitike, I think we're going to get a left winger, and I think we're going to get a centre back. I think those will be the final positions that we address in the squad, and I think we'll be, raring to go when the season begins in about a few weeks' time. So yeah, looking forward to it. N90, big up yourself. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for tuning in. He's also said big up to the chat. Big up yourself, N90. Mazzy says, Aussie, we are building a super team. The signings we've made so far has made us go clear of Arsenal and Man City. And if we had a few more, then it's game over for everyone, including the European teams. I have to agree with that because Arsenal, for me, no, the Gyökeres deal is not even concluded, is it? Unless I'm wrong, please let me know in the chat. But that deal, I think the valuation between the clubs, they're nowhere near meeting in the middle. So, they thought they were going to get a striker. They still haven't got that striker yet. So they're still waiting on finding the gunman in their team, I guess. Man City, they have bought some good players. I like the signing of Cherky. Ryan is a great player. Nouri is a great profile as well. But does that elevate their game or their team further than Liverpool? I don't think it does because our foundation is very, very solid right now. And we've added to it. So I feel like we've already got advantage where we've got a solid foundation. We've got a winning mentality because we won the league. We're going to feel a bit more confident, a bit more sort of invincible to an extent going into next season. And with these other players added to the mix, the likes of Verts, Kirkes, Frimpong, and now, of course, Ekitike, who should be a Liverpool player very soon. If we were to add Rodrigo and Guehi, for example, yeah, it's game over. I think in terms of the Premier League, we should be walking away with the title. I'm expecting us to compete in a domestic competition as well because our second string is probably just as good as anyone's first team, if I'm being honest. And I feel like Europe as well, they will be fearing Liverpool because we've been making the most noise in terms of new signings. So I'm looking forward to it. So let's see, you know, how the window concludes. That way we'll be a bit more so we can overview the squad a bit better and see, where we stand, what we can do next season. So regardless, very, very exciting prospect for Liverpool. Raja Penty says Martin Zubimendi is a player that I wanted after he showed levels at the Euros, but Granberg showed boss levels last season. Don't get me wrong, I'm just gonna throw shade at Zubimendi because he didn't join us, but I definitely feel like he I feel like he may have struggled in our team. I think if he played alongside Gravenberch, then it would have been a good combination. But then you're displacing McAllister in the team. For me, that's not an option. So having Gravenberch and McAllister as your double pivot is the perfect blend, the perfect balance. So when it would probably have been a third choice midfielder for us, which on paper actually wouldn't have been a bad thing. But when you've got a player who you've sold the project to and they wanted to stay on for a year, and then 1 year later they've gone on to sign for a club that came, below us in the league, haven't won anything for a number of years, but that's the one that appeals to you. So traded the mountains to the the traffic and you know the crazy lifestyle of London. So let him be in terms of what he's doing. But good player, don't get me wrong. I don't know if he's going to be the groundbreaking player that some people expect. I think he'll add a good mix. If he plays alongside Declan Rice in the midfield, then that would be a good balance. But I don't think he's going to be a standout signing. He's not going to have the impact like a Rodri did at Man City. He's not to that level, in my opinion. So let's see what happens. Groundberg for me was by far the best player in the league in terms of that number 6 role last season. So for me, he's got room to grow. And if he fulfills that, then he's competing with Rodri to be known as that guy in world football. So for me, I'm pleased in terms of Gravenberch's development. I'm pleased that he's got the respect that he finally deserves. And for me, he's one of the first names on the team sheet now. So I'm really, really happy in terms of what he's done over the last 12 months. Podrick, be himself, he says, don't think they buy a winger and it's Nyoni and Rio who pick up the minutes. I think that'd be a lot of pressure on the two kids there, to be honest with you. I think Rio looks special. Let's not be around the bush. He looks like a special, special talent. But for him to be the backup to Gakpo, because let's be honest, if Gakpo picks up an injury, to throw Rio in the mix, I think that's too much at this stage of his career. He needs to be given the freedom or the license to play in less profile games, i.e., the under 23s, learn your trade, develop there, make mistakes. So when you are sort of ready for the first team because you've been gaining experience or you've been gaining match time for the under 23s, then you're in a good position to be in the first team. Right now, I feel like next season or this coming season from August onwards, that's the season to let him develop in the under 23s. And then as the season progresses, then we kind of use him here and there and then get him accustomed to the first team. And then next season, that's his breakthrough season. That's what I'm predicting for him. Don't want to put too much pressure on him. He's a very, very special talent. So you have to be very careful in terms of how you nurture him as well. So for me, it's important that we sign a left winger to replace Luis Diaz directly because if we don't do that, I feel like we've already, you know, reduced the strength in depth where, that used to be one of our strongest areas of our squad. So I feel like we definitely need to address that and add another left winger. Kieran says, of course, I see us as favourites for the title in the upcoming season, but I never subscribe to the idea that a season is done before it starts. Football just doesn't work like that. I agree. You definitely have to, say with a pinch of salt. But I think due to what Liverpool are doing, the fans are excited, and yeah, I can see, why we're feeling that way. That's why I'm not saying we're going to win the quad, or even though I'd love to. But if we were to get Isak, then yeah, I'm shameless. I'm going to say we're winning the quad, especially we've got Isak and Ekitike. But let's see. We'll see how it goes. It'll be very interesting to see how the team plays in preseason because we might have a different tactical approach. So that's going to be an exciting prospect for us fans next season. So a lot to look forward to say the least. And Kieran with the second comment says most people would have said Man City would win the league last season, and look what happened. Not many people even predicted us to win in a title, to even be in a title race. Football is unpredictable. I agree with that, but when you look at Man City's squad, it was always I thought they had decent cover, but Rodri was such a unicorn type of player for them. If he was to go missing, then they didn't have adequate quality. That was always an area that I assessed and thought, you know what, if he was injured, then they'd really struggle. Like a lot of teams would struggle when their best players are out. The difference with Liverpool is that we still had cover within the squad. Because what impressed me about Liverpool was our bench was always a solid bench, regardless of who was playing. And there was some players like Chiesa, who's on my screen right now. He barely made a squad most of the time. So I feel like just because, we won the league, we shouldn't water down what we did last season. I feel like we've actually excelled even further by adding these quality players to our squad. And I feel like we're raring to go. We're trying to make it back to back. And hopefully we can get it done. I truly believe we will. City have made some good additions, but it's not the complete squad. Defensively, I still feel like they're quite shaky. In the midfield, I don't think they're as solid as they were. I know Rodri's coming back, but they're not the sort of right team in my opinion. So we'll see. We'll see what happens next season. It's going to be a great season regardless, because I think there's a lot of teams that are going to really go all out and try and challenge for Liverpool. So it's going to be very, very exciting from the neutral point of view. Podrick says, I still don't think it's out of the question that Wirtz will play on left floating inside. You can't really. I think he will play that role. In some games, I don't think that will be his primary position. I think he will be the number 10 in our team. But it just depends in terms of, who else we sign. And I always feel like with Verts, he can play that left side, and you've got Sobozlai that can play that number 10. So that's why I said that with players like Sobozlai, Gakpo, they might not be your first team players in your starting 11, but they're going to be in and around the team. So Verts on the left is not a crazy shout. I just see him predominantly playing more in the central, and then on the left he can play on occasions depending on who we face. Ozan Kabas says City is still going to be our strongest challenger this coming season. Ozzy, you have to expect Pep to bounce back. I definitely agree with that. I think for me, Man City are the ones that are going to challenge us the most this season. Arsenal, I don't me too. I don't fear them right now because I don't think they're making the right additions to the squad and they're not learning. You know, there's areas in that pitch or in their team that they need strength and they're not doing it the right way. So Man City, they've definitely added quality to their team. It's just finding the right dynamic for them and finding sort of the right type of players as well. 'Cause I think defensively they've got quite a lot of defenders, but they need to find the right combination. So once they do that, I definitely think they'll be challenging us. But I feel like Liverpool just have a bit more about them right now. We've got a team where we haven't sold many players, and I don't think we'll be selling, many players in terms of our first team starters or anything to that nature. But we've got a very strong squad. We've got a young squad as well that are hungry, that are raring to go. So I'm always going to back my team. But I feel like even from a neutral point of view, you can't, think otherwise in terms of Liverpool being favourites to win the title. Kieran says, I totally agree, Ozan. Mazzy says, Ozzy, it feels like we're building a dynasty. Do you think we can dominate like this 70s and 80s? I feel like Armstrong might be there for a long time, like Wenger and Ferguson, bro. He could be. Um, but I always feel like with these sort of things, you just got to take it a season at a time because, as Ozan kind of mentioned earlier on, football is a bit unpredictable. You just never know in terms of how things plan out. And I feel like with Liverpool, this is probably the first time where we've won the league title. Of course, we've only won it twice in the last 30 odd years. But when we won it the first time, we didn't respond. We didn't show that we're a big team. We didn't invest in the squad or strengthen the squad. This time round, we've won, but we're moving like we lost because we're doing a lot to try and add more quality to the squad. So I'm loving the way we're moving right now. And I feel like even if we do like most of our sort of signings this summer, for years to come, we might just need to sign one or two players and add to the squad. So, that could be how we move going forward. And look, if that is it, it's all be it. As long as we sign the right profile, the right players, that is the key for me. So yeah, in terms of your point there, you never know. I feel like it's a little bit too hard to predict right now because there are a lot of strong teams in the league and in Europe, but I just feel like Liverpool are on a different level right now, if I'm being honest with you. They are a level above Man City and Arsenal. Man City are the team that can definitely close the gap and come back to our level. But at the minute, I've not seen enough to suggest that will happen, for sure. So let's see, what happens when the season starts. And Podrick says, I think Stott loves Dom too much to take him out the 11. I don't think it's going to be like sort of like a standard 11 every week. It's going to be rotation. It's going to depend on who's playing, who's available, who's our opposition, and because of that, Verts might be playing on the left at times. Szoboszlai will be there, and vice versa. I can see Szoboszlai playing on the left at times as well because it's a role that he has played at previous clubs. He played there for Red Bull Leipzig. In fact, for Hungary, he plays on the left hand side, but just has a more of a freer role. So that could be a role we see him utilized a bit more. So you can't rule it out. I feel like, fans are quick to dismiss and say, oh, suppose like backup. On paper, I'm going to present it as the backup, but in reality, he's going to get a lot of game time, in my opinion. So he'll be very heavily involved, but I think Verts is a player on a different level in terms of what he brings to the table, in terms of creativity and scoring goals. So he's definitely going to be, the game changer for us next season. So I'm excited in terms of how he's going to play and the rest of the team as well. That's the last comment, and that is the end of the show. Thank you so much for tuning, everyone. Appreciate your engagement as always. We're gonna give everyone a shout. Shout out to Spirit Up LFC fans. Shout out to Kieran, to Mazzy, to Raja Painting, to who else do we have? To Double D, to Royal Red, to Jordan, to Ozan Kabak. Big up yourself. Um, big up to N90. Big up to Podrick. Appreciate your comments. Just got a comment here actually before we close the show From Billy, he says, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam to you, Billy. He says, first time watching you, bro. Big up, respect the hustle and grind. Do you do shows during the day? UK time for us Liverpool fans deserve this chance of window finally. Oh, you could you couldn't have said it better. We definitely deserve this transfer window. We've not had anything like this for quite some time. In terms of my shows, I normally do it in the evening. So in terms of UK time, I normally do my shows around 10, 11 p.m. I do the odd occasional show during the daytime, but more or less late in the evening. So if you're unable to watch it live, feel free to watch in the replay. Drop your comments, and I'll sure to respond to it as well. But yeah, normally in the evenings, that's normally my tally. But I normally do quite regular shows. So I normally do shows, especially now because off season. Um, any sort of transfer news, I'm there in the evenings producing a show. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting the channel. It's your first time watching, so hopefully you've subscribed. And yeah, we'll expect to see you in the live chat at some point as well. So yeah, thank you for your comment there. And Ozan Kawak says, thanks again, Ozzy. Have a good night. You too, Ozan Kawak. Appreciate your time and thank you for your engagement. And then Kieran Fletcher says, thanks for the great stream. Good night, guys. Likewise, Kieran. Appreciate you coming on. Billy says, will do, bro. I'll be watching more love. Appreciate your support there. Thank you so much, Billy. And that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to speak with you all very, very soon. Goodbye.